10 players whose careers were ruined by injury. Football is the beautiful game, however, people don't often discuss the nasty side of it. Injury. The stars whose careers were taken from them, due to their bodies failing them. Though football is a team sport, ultimately players must rely on their individual bodies to be healthy and allow them to produce magic on the pitch. These are 10 players whose careers were ruined by injury. But before we get into it, make sure to smash that like button into the top right corner and subscribe whilst you're there. Ronaldo Nazario. Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima, otherwise known as R9, the original Ronaldo. O Fenomeno was and is still one of the most beloved footballers of all time, if you couldn't tell by the number of nicknames he has. His insane combination of electric pace and monstrous strength, his ability to physically dominate, that made him so special in combination with immense talent, touch, and grace. However, it was his physical condition that was ultimately his downfall. After a spectacular breakout debut season at PSV Eindhoven, R9's second season in the Netherlands was kneecapped, if you may, by a knee injury that majorly limited his playing time. Outside of playing time, however, the Brazilian wasn't impacted by the injury, as he still scored nearly a goal a game in the 21 appearances he made within the season. Sadly though, this knee injury reoccurred. It began to plague O Fenomeno and ultimately led to the downfall of football's biggest star. Starting at Inter Milan in a match against Lex on the 21st of November 1999, he hobbled off the pitch, and post-match it was confirmed that he ruptured a tendon within his knee. Knee tendon injuries are infamous for derailing careers in many sports, especially when requiring surgery, and Ronaldo needed surgery. He returned on the 12th April 2000 for the Coppa Italia final against Lazio, a huge gain for Inter Milan only amplified by Ronaldo's return. He completely ruptured his kneecap within 6 minutes. Nilton Petrone, R9's physiotherapist, is quoted as saying that this incident was the worst football injury he'd ever witnessed, and that Ronaldo's kneecap had actually exploded. From then on, we saw glimpses, moments, even spells of the legendary R9. When he was available at Real Madrid, he was still immensely successful, famously earning a standing ovation from Manchester United fans at Old Trafford after scoring a hat-trick at Old Trafford. However, his inconsistent fitness from that point forward led to the legend fading. Ronaldo Nazario had short spells at AC Milan and Corinthians before ultimately retiring in 2011. With that being said though, it cannot be understated how strong R9 must have been to not only return to football, but the highest level following his knee exploding at Inter Milan. It was post-injury that he famously scored 8 goals at the 2002 World Cup and earned that standing ovation at Old Trafford. Though he may not have had his famous explosiveness anymore, the talent was still there. Arjen Robben. Arjen Robben is a great of his generation, famous for having his one method, cutting in from the right wing onto his left foot with great pace and skill, and having a dig. Yet despite knowing exactly what he wanted to do, nobody could stop him. Apart from his body, the bloke was constantly injured. He moved to Chelsea in the summer of 2004, however, didn't make his debut until November, as he broke his metatarsal in a pre-season friendly against Roma, missing 11 games as a result. He then suffered another metatarsal injury in his other foot in February, 4 months later, missing 8 games due to it. After Chelsea, he moved to Real Madrid, yet it was more of the same: ankle injuries, Achilles irritations, torn muscle fibers. It was at Bayern Munich where things began to change. Oh, he was still injured constantly, mostly comprising of joint injuries and muscle tears across his ankles, groins, and abdomen. But they gave him time to recover and trusted in his abilities, rather than casting him aside. He stayed at the Bavarian Giants for a decade, forming the most lethal wing combination of the 2010s with teammate Frank Ribery, affectionately dubbed Robbery, which is kinda intriguing how they managed to make crime sound affectionate, where Robben reached the peak of his career. He won the treble in 2012 to 2013 and helped maintain Bayern's dominance over the Bundesliga for a decade. However, age and injuries began to become too much. Eventually, in 2019, Arjen Robben left Bavaria to join his first professional club, Groningen, where he played 6 league games and of course had his second greatest number of games missed from a single injury at 25 with a calf injury. Marco van Basten. A true legendary figure of the game, Marco van Basten is another case of a career being severely cut short due to injury. The Dutch striker was one of the most dominant forces of 80s and 90s football, racking up a ridiculous 219 goals in 281 league appearances for Ajax and AC Milan. The Dutchman's career was majorly successful despite being cut short, winning an absolute plethora of awards, including 3 Ballon d'Ors, 3 Eredivisie titles, the European Cup Winners' Cup with Ajax, 3 Serie A titles, 2 European Cups with AC Milan, and the Euros with the Netherlands for the country's first time in 1988. The man has a full kitchen worth of pots. Sadly though, Van Basten was forced to retire aged 28 due to the amount of trouble his ankle was causing him. His ankle woes began at Ajax, where Van Basten underwent ankle surgery December 7, 1986, and returned just shy of 4 months later on March 1, 1987. However, just under a year from his initial ankle surgery, Marco went under the knife again for further ankle surgery in his first season at AC Milan, with over double the recovery time of the initial surgery, at 173 days. Seemingly, there was hope that this had fixed Van Basten's issues, as he didn't require any more surgery, up until the 1992-93 season. He missed 4 months of the season undergoing another ankle surgery, only to injure it again and miss 2 weeks of football a month after his return. This injury then led to a final ankle surgery which sidelined the Dutchman for over a year, 391 days to be exact. Unsuccessful in his attempts to return to football, Marco van Basten officially retired in 1995, aged 30. Marco van Basten's injury woes actually led to debate and rule change within the sport, as in the 1998 World Cup, tackles from behind were outright outlawed, as a result being colloquially known as the Van Basten Law. So, when your dad complains that everyone's soft these days, and there's nothing wrong with going through the back of someone, point him to Van Basten's career. Santi Cazorla. Oh, Santi Cazorla, what a curious and intriguing player. Arriving at the Emirates in a time of turmoil and discontent, Santi Cazorla brought calmness, at least as much as possible during the Arsenal fan TV heyday. Though maybe not one of the most talented players in the world, I think even Arsenal fans wouldn't have legitimately made him a Ballon d'Or contender at any point. There was something magnetic about Santi Cazorla and the way he played. Class, skill, and energy personified. Cazorla had some previous injury history, but wouldn't necessarily be deemed the most injury-prone of players, having suffered 2 unrelated injuries in his first spell at Villarreal, but 0 during his season at Malaga, according to Transfermarkt. At first, this seemed to track at Arsenal as well, picking up an ankle injury at the start of the 13-14 season, missing 7 matches, but being healthy from then on, and through the entire 14-15 season. However, from 15-16 was where things seriously began to unravel. He had a knee injury that sidelined him for a large chunk of the 15-16 season, missing 20 games, 98 days. Unfortunately for the diminutive Spaniard, he immediately irritated his Achilles on his first game back, which accumulated in him, having missed approximately 2/3 of the season by the time he recovered. So it's the 2016-17 season. Santi is back fit and everyone's good to go, right? Yeah, that ankle issue never went away. In October 2016, Santi Cazorla underwent ankle surgery to try and fix his foot. Yet there was setback after setback, complications pushing back Cazorla's recovery until when he returned, he'd missed 618 days. Sorry, yeah, let me just make that clear, 618 days. Nearly 2 years, 103 games missed. Safe to say Santi Cazorla wasn't quite the same player again. Philippe Coutinho. Coutinho is most notable for 2 things, being one of the most fun things about those Brendan Rodgers and early Klopp Liverpool teams which attacked with carefree abandon, despite not having the defensive quality to cover it. and potentially being one of the biggest transfers to have undeniably flopped when he moved to Barcelona for an eye-watering 135 million euros. Unlike Cazorla, R9, or Van Basten, Coutinho has never really had a specific major injury that has derailed his career, aside from a potentially reoccurring hamstring issue that shows up in his record. The issue with Coutinho is that he is always out with short to medium-term injuries, accruing 20 separate injuries throughout his career. These consisted of issues all over his body, from back problems to thigh strains, knee pains to shoulder injuries. It's almost as if his body is simply not built to withstand the physical intensity of football at the highest level. He did suffer a meniscus rupture in December 2020, which sidelined him for 7 months, but this was after his career had already started hitting upon a rocky path. Marco Reus. Arguably the centerpiece of Jurgen Klopp's and Borussia Dortmund's rise to football hipster stardom in the early 2010s, Marco Reus has suffered at the hands of the almighty injury gods. His transfer-marked injury history is 5 pages long, for crying out loud. I feel like that tells you the story in and of itself. I don't even need to bother. Except I do, since it is my job, anyway. Marco Reus was renowned for being a dynamic, clinical, and intelligent winger/second striker who in his early 20s looked like he was going to command a hefty fee and leave to pastures new like many a BVB player has. Like Coutinho, Reus hadn't had any major injuries up until his cruciate ligament ruptured in 16-17 season, leaving him off the pitch for 220 days. But this was well after Reus was already deemed largely injury-prone. The issue is that Reus was constantly injured with muscle strains, reoccurring inflammations, and issues particularly with his ankles and adductor muscles. This accumulation of injuries and wear and tear on his body stopped Reus from building runs of consistent and regular first-team football for years. Though still a technically talented and effective player, it's evident that all these injuries took away some of Reus' athleticism a lot sooner than expected otherwise. As a result, it made his game somewhat more one-dimensional and a far easier prospect for defenders to contain. Reus still plays for Borussia Dortmund and is their captain, a testament to his loyalty to the team. Fun fact, Marco Reus is named after another player on this list, Marco van Basten. He was originally going to be called Dennis. Jack Wilshire. So, you know how I've been comparing and contrasting the profile of injuries between the players on this list, with Reus and Coutinho being relatively similar, but different from the likes of R9 and Cazorla. Well, Jack Wilshire was both. Constantly injured, and boy were those injuries nasty. Jack Wilshire was a rarity in English football at the time. A squat central midfielder known for his low center of gravity, low line-breaking passes, and progressive carrying ability. He'd often draw comparisons to the Spanish archetype of midfielder in the early 2010s, to the dismay of Pep Guardiola, who famously wasn't a fan of Wilshire. The response to a player of this mold in the Premier League during the late 2000s and early 2010s for a lot of teams was simple: go in on him and tackle him hard. And Wilshire's ankles felt it. This was also likely exacerbated due to his inherent injury proneness just as a human being, and his playstyle, which often involved twisting and turning in tight space frequently, with Wilshire's low center of gravity placing extra pressure on his feet. Though with a sprinkling of calf injuries and knee injuries, it was Jack's ankles that ultimately led to the downfall of the English Iniesta. He had suffered a short-term ankle injury during the 09-10 season, leaving him out for just under 2 weeks, and didn't suffer any injuries during the 10-11 season. However, at the very start of the 11-12 season, Wilshire sprained his ankle, which saw him out for 2 months, before it was deemed that he required ankle surgery, which sidelined him for 127 days, missing 25 games in the process. From there, it simply went from bad to worse, as Pandora's box of injuries was seemingly opened, cursing Wilshire. Within the same season as his ankle surgery, he suffered 2 more medium to long-term injuries, being ruled out for 3 months with a fatigue fracture. He then proceeded with a knee surgery a week after returning, stopped Wilshire from playing for 4 months. Following both procedures on his ankle and knee, They never recovered, constantly twinging and re-injuring both body parts, which led to him undergoing ankle surgery again in the 18-19 season with West Ham. Ultimately, it all proved too big a hurdle for Wilshire to surmount, leading to him retiring at age 30. Ibrahim Afelili. Ibrahim Afelili was one of those players when you're playing FIFA as a kid, and you're sitting there thinking this guy is going to be amazing, and then he wasn't. An extremely promising young player coming through and making an impact at PSV, Barcelona signed the Dutchman for €3 million in 2010. He featured in 28 matches for Barcelona in his first season, a respectable amount of game time for a young player moving to arguably the greatest club side of all time. It was in the following season when issues began to occur. He didn't start the season off on the right foot, being sidelined with muscular problems from the end of July to the start of September. However, only weeks after returning, Afelili ruptured his cruciate ligament, the first in a long series of major long-term injuries. He went on loan to Schalke 04 in the 12-13 season. However, he was ruled out with another muscle injury in January 2013, which saw him off the pitch for over a year. He joined Olympiacos on another loan in 14-15, which was successful and saw him injury-free. Unfortunately for him, though, Barcelona released him due to his previous injury history. He then joined Stoke, where his knee injuries kept plaguing him, having a 234-day spell out, and then a separate 170-day spell out recovering from knee surgery. Eventually, he was released by Stoke and picked up by PSV as a free agent. However, they released him too. Following this, he retired in 2021. Alexander Pato. You know, I'm starting to think the human knee and ankle just aren't very well designed, because here we have another star ruined by his knees and ankles' inability to stay functioning. You just had to be there to understand how good Alexander Pato was. Like his predecessors R9, Kaká, and Romario, Pato combined the perfect blend of pace, power, and technical skill into a beautiful but lethal package, like a really spicy takeaway. Looks appetizing, but is secretly deadly. Starting his youth and professional career at Internacional in Brazil, it was at AC Milan where the legend of Pato was born. And it was at AC Milan where it would very quickly and sadly die. Again, there is no singular major injury which led to Pato's downfall. It was a series of recurring and grating injuries which wore away at Pato's physical gifts and ultimately left him the shell of a player he once was. A bit similar to Coutinho, he suffered injuries all across his body, but primarily muscle tears and tendon strains or ruptures. In the 10-11 season alone, he suffered 3 separate ankle injuries, one of which concerned his Achilles tendon, leaving him out for 53 days and missing 8 matches in the process. Despite this ankle issue, Pato still was performing like one of the most promising strikers in the world. However, in the second half of the 11-12 seasons, Pato could not get over a string of injuries simply labeled as muscle problems, muscle fatigue, and muscle injury, which saw him effectively miss the second half of the season. Following this bout of muscle issues, Pato was not the same player. He didn't look as physically sharp, and Milan seemingly didn't want to be burdened by a player who was never available to them. As a result, Pato moved back to Brazil with Corinthians, from where he would go on loan to Sao Paulo and Chelsea, where his attempts to reignite his career regrettably failed. At Sao Paulo, he partially damaged his cruciate ligament, which is in your knee, which may have been an early warning sign for the knee injury, and the 2 knee surgeries following it that he underwent at Orlando City in the 2020-21 season. As of writing, Pato's contract will expire at Orlando City and he will be a free agent, aged 33. Michael Owen. Despite being the second youngest ever Ballon d'Or winner, only behind R9, Michael Owen's impact on the game was significantly less than a title like that would suggest. His hamstrings were made of breadsticks. Owen began suffering hamstring issues at Liverpool, but that didn't stop him from making a lucrative move to Real Madrid in 2004, during the height of the Galacticos era. Criticism from the Spanish media and fanbase saw Owen only stay in Spain for 1 season, despite having the best goals-to-minutes ratio in the squad and seemingly staying injury-free. On his return to England with Newcastle, Owen's injuries really began to catch up with him. Rupturing his cruciate ligament, Owen effectively missed the entire 2006 to 2007 season, and from then on, every season of his would see at least one mid to long-term injury. Muscular problems the season after saw him miss 7 games. A growing strain and ankle injury saw him miss 9 games in the 8 to 9 seasons. Then he moved to Manchester United in a bit-part role, where a combination of reoccurring groin strains and thigh problems saw him be unavailable for a combined 61 games in 3 seasons. Though he still made an impact in individual matches, most famously the Manchester Derby, where he scored an added time winner for Manchester United, Owen was never the same again. So that's been 10 players whose careers were ruined by injury. If you learned anything new and found the video interesting, please like and subscribe as we have plenty more videos in the pipeline. Also discuss in the comment section any players we missed or any videos you want to see from us in the future.